Sarah Martinez adjusted her worn cardigan as she approached the imposing glass entrance of the federal building. At 34, she had the kind of face that disappeared in crowds. Unremarkable features framed by simple brown hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Her black flats made soft sounds against the polished concrete as she walked, clutching a small leather purse that had seen better days. The building towered above her, all steel and reflective glass that seemed to stretch endlessly into the gray morning sky. Workers in expensive suits hurried past her, speaking into wireless earpieces and carrying briefcases that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Sarah felt like a fish swimming upstream as she made her way to the security checkpoint. Two guards stood behind a metal detector that looked more sophisticated than anything she had seen at airports. The older guard, a heavy-set man with graying temples, barely glanced up from his newspaper. His younger partner, tall and lean with suspicious eyes, seemed to catalog every person who passed through their station. "Ma'am, please place all metal items in the tray," the younger guard instructed as Sarah approached. His name tag read Officer Chun in bold letters. Sarah nodded and began emptying her pockets. A few coins, her house keys, and a simple silver watch that had belonged to her grandmother went into the plastic container. She walked through the metal detector without incident, but something in Officer Chin's expression made her pause. "Excuse me, miss," he called out, his voice carrying an edge of authority. "Can I see some identification?" Sarah reached in her purse and pulled out her driver's license. Chin studied it carefully, his frown deepening as he read the information. The older guard, whose name tag identified him as Sergeant Rodriguez, finally looked up from his sports section. "Everything okay, Chun?" Rodriguez asked, though his tone suggested this was routine. "She's not on the visitor list," Chun replied, still examining Sarah's license. "And she doesn't look like she works here." Sarah felt heat rise to her cheeks. She knew exactly what Chun meant by that comment. Her thrift store clothing and modest appearance stood out sharply against the polished professionals who typically entered this building. She had grown accustomed to being underestimated, but it still stung. "I do work here," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the embarrassment burning in her chest. Chin's eyebrows shot up. "Really? In what department?" "Research and Development, Sublevel B," Sarah replied. Both guards exchanged glances. Sublevel B was restricted access, housing some of the most sensitive projects in the entire facility. The idea that this plainly dressed woman worked in such a classified area seemed to strike them as absurd. "Look, lady," Chun said, his patience clearly wearing thin. "I've been working this post for 3 years. I know everyone who has access to the restricted levels, and I've never seen you before." Sarah's jaw tightened. She had been working in the building for 6 months, but she typically arrived before dawn and left well after sunset. Most of the day shift security had never encountered her during regular hours. "I work the overnight shift," she explained. "I arrive 11 p.m. and leave around 7 a.m. Rodriguez joined his partner at the security desk, both men now treating Sarah as a potential security threat. Other employees had begun to notice the commotion, slowing their pace as they passed through the checkpoint. "Ma'am, we're going to need to verify your employment," Rodriguez said in a tone that brooked no argument. "Please step to the side while we contact your supervisor." Sarah felt the weight of dozens of eyes upon her as she moved to a small waiting area adjacent to the security checkpoint. Whispered conversations followed her movement, and she caught fragments of speculation about who she might be and why the guards had detained her. A woman in an expensive navy suit paused near the security desk, her curiosity evident. "Is there a problem?" she asked Chun in a voice that suggested she was accustomed to having her questions answered. "Just a verification issue," Chun replied professionally. "Nothing to worry about, Dr. Williams." Dr. Williams glanced at Sarah with the same dismissive expression that Sarah had encountered countless times throughout her life. In a world where appearance often determined respect, Sarah had learned to let her work speak for itself. Chin picked up his phone and dialed an extension. "Security to R&D, Sublevel B," he said into the receiver. "We need employment verification for Sarah Martinez." Sarah watched as Chen's expression shifted from skepticism to confusion during the brief conversation. He hung up the phone and immediately dialed another number. "Give me Director Thompson," he told whoever answered. "This is urgent." The mention of Director Thompson caused a ripple of interest among the nearby employees. Dr. Thompson was a legend in the scientific community, known for his work on projects so classified that most people in the building had never seen him in person. Sarah remained calm in her chair, hands folded in her lap, while the drama unfolded around her. She had anticipated this moment might come eventually. Working in shadows and secrecy had its advantages, but it also meant that few people knew who she really was. Rodriguez approached her with a more respectful demeanor than he had shown earlier. "Ma'am, we're having trouble reaching your supervisor. Could you provide us with your employee identification number?" Sarah recited a series of numbers and letters that made both guards pause. The designation she provided indicated a security clearance level that very few people in the entire building possessed. Chen's phone rang, and he answered it immediately. "Security checkpoint," he said, then listened for nearly a minute without speaking. His face went through several expressions: surprise, confusion, and, finally, something approaching alarm. "Yes, sir," he said into the phone. "We'll escort her up immediately." "My apologies, sir." He hung up and turned to his partner with wide eyes. "That was Director Thompson himself," he whispered, though his voice carried far enough for Sarah to hear. "He's coming down here personally." The waiting area fell silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant sound of elevator motors. Sarah could feel the curiosity radiating from every person within earshot. Director Thompson had not been seen on the main floors of the building in over 2 years. 5 minutes later, the elevator doors opened with a soft chime, and a distinguished man in his 60s stepped out. Dr. Marcus Thompson had silver hair and intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He wore a simple gray suit that somehow managed to convey more authority than the expensive designer clothing worn by most executives in the building. Thompson's gaze swept the security area until it found Sarah. His stern expression immediately softened into something approaching relief. "Ms. Martinez," he said, walking directly to her, "I apologize for this inconvenience. I should have anticipated that you might encounter difficulties during daytime hours." The entire security area had gone completely quiet. Even the steady stream of arriving employees had slowed to observe this unprecedented scene. Sarah stood and smoothed her cardigan. "It's not a problem, Dr. Thompson. I understand the guards were just doing their job." Thompson turned to face Chun and Rodriguez, both of whom now looked as though they wished they could disappear into the floor. "Gentlemen," Thompson said in a voice that carried decades of academic authority, "I want you to understand something very clearly. Ms. Martinez has the highest security clearance of anyone in this building, including myself. She has direct authorization from agencies whose names I am not permitted to speak aloud in this setting." Chen's face had gone pale. "Sir, we had no way of knowing." Thompson held up a hand to stop the explanation. "I'm not criticizing you for following protocol. However, I'm going to ensure that this situation does not happen again. Ms. Martinez's access supersedes normal verification procedures." He turned back to Sarah with an apologetic smile. "Would you like me to escort you to your laboratory, or do you prefer to maintain your usual low profile?" Sarah glanced around at the crowd of curious faces surrounding them. Her cover of anonymity had been thoroughly blown, but perhaps that was not entirely a bad thing. "I think I can manage from here," she said quietly. "Thank you for coming down, Dr. Thompson." Thompson nodded and headed back toward the elevators, leaving behind a security checkpoint full of people trying to process what they had just witnessed. Sarah picked up her belongings from the security tray and walked toward the restricted access elevator as if nothing unusual had happened. Officer Chen fumbled with his communication device, clearly trying to update security protocols for future encounters. Sarah could hear him speaking rapidly to someone on the other end about special clearances and updated access lists. As she waited for the elevator, Sarah noticed Dr. Williams approaching with a completely different expression than she had worn earlier. The dismissive attitude had been replaced by obvious curiosity and a hint of respect. "Excuse me," Dr. Williams said hesitantly. "I don't think we've been properly introduced. I'm Dr. Elizabeth Williams. I run the Materials Science Division." Sarah turned and offered a polite smile. "Sarah Martinez. Nice to meet you. I have to ask," Dr. Williams continued, lowering her voice. "What kind of work do you do that requires that level of clearance?" The elevator arrived with a soft chime, and Sarah stepped inside. She turned to face Dr. Williams and the small crowd that had gathered to witness this conversation. "The kind of work that most people wouldn't believe exists," Sarah replied as the doors began to close. The last thing she saw was Dr. Williams' face, filled with the same mixture of curiosity and confusion that seemed to characterize everyone's reaction to learning about her true role in the organization. As the elevator descended past the main floors and into the restricted sublevels, Sarah finally allowed herself to smile. She had spent 6 months moving through the building like a ghost, known only to a handful of people with the highest security clearances. Today had changed that forever. The elevator stopped at sublevel B, and the doors opened to reveal a corridor that looked nothing like the polished corporate environment upstairs. Here, the walls were lined with reinforced steel, and every door required multiple forms of authentication to open. Sarah walked to the end of the hallway and placed her palm on a biometric scanner. A soft blue light scanned her hand, followed by a retinal scanner that verified her identity. Finally, she spoke her name and employee number into a voice recognition system. "Welcome back, Dr. Martinez," came a computerized voice as the laboratory door slid open. Inside, banks of quantum computers hummed quietly, while holographic displays showed complex mathematical equations that would have been incomprehensible to most PhD physicists. This was Sarah's domain, a place where she had been working on projects that would fundamentally change humanity's understanding of reality itself. She hung her cardigan on a simple coat hook and rolled up her sleeves, ready to continue work that had been interrupted by the morning's events. The modest woman who had been questioned by security guards was about to resume research that could reshape the future of human civilization. Word of the morning's events spread through the federal building faster than Sarah could have imagined. By noon, everyone from junior researchers to department heads had heard some version of the story about the mysterious woman with unprecedented security clearance who worked in a forbidden sublevel. Dr. Elizabeth Williams found herself fielding questions all morning from colleagues who had witnessed the scene at security. The Materials Science Division had always been considered cutting edge, but whatever Sarah Martinez was working on clearly operated on an entirely different level of classification. "Have you ever heard of quantum consciousness research?" Dr. Williams asked her assistant, Marcus, as they reviewed quarterly budget reports in her office. Marcus looked up from his tablet with a puzzled expression. "Quantum consciousness? That's theoretical physics combined with neuroscience. Pretty fringe stuff, if you ask me." "Why?" Dr. Williams had spent her lunch break researching everything she could find about advanced quantum research projects. Most of the information she discovered was either heavily theoretical or classified beyond her clearance level. "Just curious," she replied, though her mind was racing with possibilities about what kind of research required such extreme secrecy. Meanwhile, 3 floors above, Director Thompson sat in his office reviewing security footage from the morning's incident. He fast-forwarded through the recording, watching Sarah's calm demeanor throughout the entire confrontation. She had handled the situation with remarkable composure, never once losing her temper or revealing any details about her work. Thompson's secure phone rang, displaying a number with no identifying information. Only 5 people in the world had access to this particular line. "Thompson here," he answered. "Marcus, we saw the security footage," came a voice that Thompson recognized immediately. Admiral Patricia Hayes commanded a joint task force so classified that her existence was known to fewer than 20 people in the entire government. "Admiral Hayes," Thompson replied, standing automatically despite being alone in his office. "I apologize for the breach of protocol. Dr. Martinez usually works overnight to avoid these kinds of situations." "Actually, Marcus, this might be a blessing in disguise. We've been discussing whether it's time to bring Dr. Martinez's work into a more public phase." The preliminary results from her research are exceeding all projections. Thompson sat down heavily in his chair. Sarah's research had implications that could revolutionize everything from medicine to space exploration, but it also carried risks that kept him awake at night. "Are you certain we're ready for that level of exposure?" he asked. "The Chinese and Russians are closer to breakthrough than we anticipated," Admiral Hayes replied. "Our intelligence suggests they're maybe 18 months behind Dr. Martinez's progress. We need to accelerate our timeline." Back in Sublevel B, Sarah was completely absorbed in her work, unaware of the discussions taking place about her future. She stood before a quantum computer array that occupied an entire wall of the laboratory, its processing power equivalent to every traditional computer on Earth combined. The holographic display in front of her showed a three-dimensional model of human neural networks, but these weren't ordinary brain scans. Sarah had discovered a way to map consciousness itself, to visualize the quantum processes that created human thought and memory. Her breakthrough had come 6 months earlier when she realized that consciousness wasn't just an emergent property of complex neural networks. Instead, human awareness operated on quantum principles that allowed consciousness to interact with reality at a fundamental level. The implications were staggering. If consciousness could influence quantum states, then human thought might literally shape reality around us. The research suggested that psychic phenomena, telepathy, and even precognition might have scientific basis in quantum mechanics. Sarah manipulated the holographic display, zooming in on specific neural pathways that showed unusual quantum coherence. The data indicated that certain individuals possessed natural abilities to maintain quantum coherence in their neural networks for extended periods. These people, who often reported unusual experiences or abilities, weren't delusional or fraudulent. They were evolutionary advances, humans whose brains operated more efficiently in the quantum realm. Sarah's research had identified approximately 1 in 10,000 people who showed this enhanced quantum coherence. More remarkably, the ability could be developed and strengthened through specific training techniques that Sarah had developed. She turned to another workstation where she had been developing practical applications for her discoveries. On the screen, she reviewed data from recent experiments where test subjects had successfully influenced random number generators using focused consciousness alone. The effect was small, but statistically significant across hundreds of trials. Human consciousness could literally alter probability at the quantum level, changing the odds of random events through directed intention. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message from Dr. Thompson. "Can you come to my office at 3 p.m.? We need to discuss expanding your research parameters." She glanced at the clock on her computer screen. It was already 2:45 p.m. Sarah saved her work and began the journey up to Thompson's office, taking the restricted elevator to the executive floor. Thompson's office was spacious, but surprisingly modest for someone of his stature. Books lined the walls from floor to ceiling, covering everything from quantum physics to ancient philosophy. A simple wooden desk sat in the center of the room, clear except for a secure computer terminal and a framed photograph of Thompson receiving the Nobel Prize 20 years earlier. "Sarah, please sit down," Thompson said, gesturing to a comfortable chair across from his desk. "We need to talk about this morning's events and what they mean for your project." Sarah settled into the chair and waited for Thompson to continue. She had learned early in her career that the most powerful people often revealed more when you let them fill the silence themselves. "Your research has attracted attention at the highest levels of government," Thompson began. "People who make decisions about national security are very interested in the practical applications of your discoveries." "I assumed that was always the case," Sarah replied. "The funding for this project didn't come from university grants." Thompson smiled. "True, but until now, your work has been purely theoretical. The recent results suggest we're approaching practical applications that could change everything." He turned his computer screen towards Sarah, showing a classified document with her name at the top. The security classification was so high that Sarah herself had never seen it before. "Your research has been designated as a national strategic asset," Thompson continued. That means the government considers your discoveries to be vital to national security and economic competitiveness. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. She had known her work was important, but seeing it classified at this level made the implications more real. "What does that mean for my research?" she asked. "It means we're moving to phase 2, Thompson replied. "Instead of just studying quantum consciousness, we're going to begin developing practical applications. The military is particularly interested in communication applications that can't be intercepted or jammed." Sarah's mind raced through the possibilities. If consciousness could influence quantum states, then it might be possible to create communication systems based on quantum entanglement that would be absolutely secure. Two people with properly trained consciousness could theoretically communicate instantaneously across any distance. "There's something else," Thompson added. "The incident this morning has made it impossible for you to maintain your previous anonymity. Too many people know about your existence now." "What are you suggesting?" Sarah asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "We're going to give you a public identity. Nothing too specific, but enough to satisfy curiosity and provide cover for expanded operations. You'll become Dr. Sarah Martinez, Senior Research Fellow in Applied Quantum Physics." Sarah considered this development. For 6 months, she had enjoyed the freedom of working in complete secrecy. No one questioned her methods or demanded progress reports for politicians and generals. "Will I still have control over the research direction?" she asked. "Absolutely," Thompson assured her. "The decision-makers understand that your work requires complete creative freedom. However, we'll need to establish a cover laboratory on one of the upper floors for public-facing activities." Thompson handed Sarah a folder containing organizational charts and facility blueprints. "You'll have a team of graduate students and junior researchers who will work on theoretical aspects of your research. They won't have access to your main laboratory, but they'll provide legitimate academic activity for anyone who investigates your background." Sarah opened the folder and reviewed the proposed setup. The cover laboratory would conduct legitimate quantum physics research, publishing papers, and attending conferences like any other academic research group. Meanwhile, her real work would continue in the secure sublevel. "There's one more thing," Thompson said. "Admiral Hayes wants to meet with you next week. She oversees the task force responsible for your project." Sarah had heard whispers about Admiral Hayes, but had never met her personally. The woman was rumored to be one of the most powerful people in the intelligence community, responsible for projects that didn't officially exist. "What does she want to discuss?" Sarah asked. "The next phase of your research involves human testing," Thompson replied. "We need to identify individuals with natural quantum coherence abilities and train them to develop their capabilities." Sarah felt excitement and concern in equal measure. The prospect of working with naturally gifted individuals was thrilling from a research perspective, but it also raised ethical questions about human experimentation. "What kind of training are we talking about?" she asked. Thompson pulled up another classified document on his screen. "Consciousness enhancement protocols, meditation techniques combined with biofeedback, and quantum field manipulation. The goal is to create a cadre of individuals who can reliably influence quantum systems through directed consciousness." Sarah realized they were talking about creating people with abilities that would seem supernatural to most of the population. The ethical implications were staggering, but so was the potential for advancing human capabilities. "How many people are we talking about?" she asked. "The initial program would identify and train 50 individuals," Thompson replied. "All military volunteers with existing security clearances. If the program succeeds, it could be expanded significantly." Sarah stood up and walked to the window overlooking the city below. Thousands of people moved through their daily lives, completely unaware that their understanding of reality was about to be fundamentally challenged. "When would this begin?" she asked. "Admiral Hayes wants to start recruitment immediately," Thompson said. "The cover laboratory will be operational within 2 weeks, and we'll begin screening volunteers next month." Sarah turned back to face Thompson. The modest woman who had been questioned by security guards that morning was about to become the leader of a program that could create the next step in human evolution. I'll need complete control over selection criteria and training protocols, she said. Thompson nodded. That's already been agreed upon. This is your project, Sarah. We're just providing the resources and support you need to change the world. Sarah picked up the folder and headed toward the door. As she reached for the handle, Thompson called out to her. Sarah, are you ready for this level of responsibility? Once we begin human testing, there's no going back. The implications of success are as significant as the risks of failure. Sarah paused at the door, considering the weight of what they were proposing. Then, she turned back to Thompson with a determined expression. Dr. Thompson, I've been ready for this my entire life. I just didn't know it until today. 6 months later, Sarah Martinez stood before a classified briefing room filled with the most powerful people in the American defense establishment. The modest cardigan and worn flats had been replaced by a professional Navy suit, but her demeanor remained as calm and focused as it had been during that fateful morning at the security checkpoint. Admiral Patricia Hayes sat at the head of the conference table, her silver hair and sharp eyes commanding attention from everyone in the room. To her right sat General Robert Morrison, head of Special Operations Command, and to her left was Dr. Jennifer Liu, the director of the National Science Foundation. Sarah activated a holographic display that filled the center of the room with three-dimensional representations of neural networks and quantum field interactions. The data she was about to present would fundamentally alter how the military understood human capabilities. Ladies and gentlemen, Sarah began, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was revealing. 6 months ago, we initiated Project Mindbridge, the first systematic attempt to develop human consciousness as a strategic asset. The hologram shifted to show statistical data from the volunteer recruitment program. Of the initial 50 military volunteers, 12 had shown natural quantum coherence abilities that could be enhanced through training. Our screening process identified individuals with measurable quantum coherence in their neural networks, Sarah continued. These volunteers demonstrated the ability to maintain quantum superposition states for extended periods, allowing their consciousness to interact directly with quantum systems. General Morrison leaned forward in his chair. Dr. Martinez, can you explain what this means in practical terms? Sarah manipulated the holographic display to show training session recordings. Watch this demonstration from last week. The hologram showed a volunteer, Staff Sergeant Maria Rodriguez, sitting in front of a quantum random number generator. Her eyes were closed in deep concentration, and monitoring equipment showed unusual brainwave patterns that synchronized with quantum field fluctuations. Sergeant Rodriguez is attempting to influence the output of a quantum random number generator, Sarah explained. Under normal circumstances, the device produces truly random sequences. However, with focused consciousness, she can bias the output toward specific patterns. The numbers on the display began showing clear bias toward higher values, far beyond statistical probability. The effect grew stronger as Sergeant Rodriguez deepened her concentration. The implications for secure communications are obvious, Admiral Hayes observed. If our operatives can influence quantum systems, we could create communication channels that are theoretically undetectable. Sarah nodded. That's correct, but it goes far beyond communication. We've documented instances of enhanced intuition, precognitive awareness, and even limited telepathic contact between trained individuals. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Dr. Liu was the first to speak. Sarah, are you suggesting that we can train people to be psychic? I'm not suggesting it, Sarah replied. I'm demonstrating it. What most people call psychic abilities are actually quantum consciousness effects that can be measured, understood, and enhanced through proper training. Sarah changed the holographic display to show brain scans from trained volunteers. The neural activity patterns were unlike anything previously documented in neuroscience literature. The volunteers have developed new neural pathways that allow their consciousness to interface with quantum fields, Sarah explained. These pathways can be strengthened through meditation, biofeedback, and exposure to controlled quantum environments. General Morrison studied the brain scans with obvious fascination. How long does the training process take? Individual results vary, Sarah replied. Some volunteers showed measurable improvement within weeks. Others required months of intensive training. However, all volunteers with natural quantum coherence have achieved some level of enhanced capability. Admiral Hayes pulled up classified intelligence reports on her tablet. Dr. Martinez, our sources indicate that both China and Russia are pursuing similar research. How do our capabilities compare to theirs? Sarah's expression grew serious. Based on available intelligence, we're approximately 2 years ahead of any foreign program. However, that advantage won't last indefinitely. The theoretical foundations of this research are becoming more widely understood. The holographic display shifted to show a world map with highlighted locations where similar research was suspected to be taking place. Red dots marked facilities in China, Russia, and several other nations. The Chinese program appears focused primarily on military applications, Sarah continued. Intelligence suggests they're attempting to develop consciousness-based guidance systems for weapons and surveillance equipment. And the Russians? Dr. Liu asked. The Russian approach is more theoretical, Sarah replied. They're investigating consciousness as a fundamental force of nature, similar to gravity or electromagnetism. Their research could lead to breakthrough applications we haven't yet considered. Admiral Hayes stood and walked to the window overlooking the Pentagon courtyard. Dr. Martinez, I need your honest assessment. Are we looking at a new arms race based on human consciousness? Sarah considered the question carefully before responding. Admiral, I believe we're looking at something much more significant than an arms race. We're witnessing the emergence of the next stage of human evolution. The room erupted in whispered conversations as military leaders and scientists grappled with the implications of Sarah's statement. General Morrison called for order. Dr. Martinez, he said, explain what you mean by the next stage of human evolution. Sarah manipulated the holographic display to show evolutionary timelines. Throughout human history, our species has developed increasingly sophisticated tools to interact with our environment. Fire, agriculture, written language, computers. Each advancement changed how humans relate to reality. The display showed brain scans comparing trained volunteers to baseline human populations. The differences were dramatic. Quantum consciousness training doesn't just give people new abilities, Sarah continued. It fundamentally changes how the human brain processes information and interacts with the universe. We're creating individuals whose consciousness operates on principles that most humans can't even comprehend. Dr. Liu raised her hand. Sarah, what are the ethical implications of creating these enhanced individuals? How do we ensure they remain loyal to democratic principles? Sarah had wrestled with this question throughout the development of Project Mindbridge. The answer she had reached was both reassuring and disturbing. The consciousness enhancement process appears to naturally align individuals with cooperative and ethical behavior, she replied. Enhanced quantum coherence seems to increase empathy and reduce aggressive tendencies. That's convenient, General Morrison observed with skepticism. It's not convenience, General. It's quantum entanglement, Sarah explained. As consciousness becomes more coherent with quantum fields, individuals begin to experience a deeper connection with other conscious beings. Aggression becomes literally painful for them. Admiral Hayes returned to her seat at the head of the table. Dr. Martinez, assuming we continue this program, what kind of capabilities might we see in trained individuals after several years of development? Sarah pulled up projections based on current progress rates. Conservative estimates suggest enhanced individuals could develop reliable telepathic communication over distances of several hundred miles. They might be able to influence electronic systems without physical contact and potentially access information through quantum field interactions. Access information how? Dr. Liu asked. Consciousness appears to be naturally entangled with quantum information fields, Sarah explained. With sufficient training, enhanced individuals might be able to access historical information, predict future probability patterns, or even communicate with other conscious entities across vast distances. The implications hung heavy in the air. They were discussing capabilities that would fundamentally alter the balance of power on Earth. General Morrison leaned back in his chair. Dr. Martinez, what do you need to accelerate this program? Sarah had prepared for this question. We need to expand from 50 volunteers to 500. We need dedicated training facilities that can accommodate long-term consciousness development programs. And we need to begin recruiting civilians with natural abilities. Civilians? Admiral Hayes asked. Military volunteers provide excellent discipline and security, Sarah replied. But civilian populations include individuals with extraordinary natural abilities who might never join the military. Artists, musicians, spiritual practitioners. These populations often contain people with remarkable quantum coherence potential. Sarah activated a new section of the holographic display showing civilian recruitment proposals. We could establish cover programs through universities and meditation centers. Legitimate consciousness research that identifies exceptional individuals for advanced training. Dr. Liu studied the recruitment plans with obvious concern. Sarah, we're talking about fundamentally changing civilian populations. The social implications could be enormous. Dr. Liu, the social implications of not pursuing this research could be catastrophic, Sarah replied. If foreign powers develop these capabilities while we restrict ourselves to military applications, we could face threats that conventional defenses can't address. Admiral Hayes called up classified intelligence reports on her tablet. Dr. Martinez, recent satellite imagery suggests that China has constructed a facility in remote Tibet that appears designed for consciousness research. The building design matches theoretical requirements for quantum coherence enhancement. Sarah felt a chill of recognition. If China was building dedicated consciousness enhancement facilities, their program was more advanced than American intelligence had estimated. Admiral, how recent is this intelligence? Sarah asked. The facility became operational last month, Hayes replied. Our best estimates suggest they're preparing to train several hundred individuals simultaneously. The room fell silent as everyone contemplated the implications. A few months earlier, Sarah had been an unknown researcher working in secret. Now, she was briefing the highest levels of government about a technology that could determine the future of human civilization. What are your recommendations, Dr. Martinez? General Morrison asked. Sarah stood and faced the assembled leadership. The modest woman who had been questioned by security guards had become the architect of humanity's next evolutionary step. I recommend immediate expansion of Project Mindbridge to national priority status, she said. We need to train thousands of enhanced individuals within the next 2 years. We need to begin civilian recruitment immediately. And we need to prepare for a world where human consciousness becomes the ultimate strategic weapon. Admiral Hayes nodded slowly. Dr. Martinez, you have full authorization to expand your program. Whatever resources you need, whatever personnel you require. This project now has the highest priority in the defense establishment. Sarah looked around the room at the faces of people who made decisions affecting millions of lives. 6 months ago, she had been invisible, working in shadows on research that most people would have dismissed as science fiction. There's one more thing, Sarah added. The volunteers who complete advanced training develop capabilities that most people would consider supernatural. We need to prepare for the possibility that enhanced individuals might choose to reveal their abilities publicly. What do you mean? Dr. Liu asked. I mean that some enhanced individuals may decide that humanity deserves to know about these capabilities, Sarah replied. We're creating people with godlike abilities and expecting them to remain silent about it indefinitely. That may not be realistic. Admiral Hayes considered this possibility with obvious concern. Dr. Martinez, what happens if this technology becomes public knowledge? Sarah smiled, and, for a moment, the powerful military leaders glimpsed something extraordinary in her expression, a depth of understanding that seemed to encompass possibilities beyond normal human comprehension. Admiral, she said quietly, I believe that day is inevitable, and, when it comes, the world will never be the same again. As the meeting concluded, and the military leaders filed out of the briefing room, Sarah remained behind, studying the holographic displays that showed the future of human consciousness. The modest woman who had once been stopped by security guards had become the architect of humanity's next chapter. Through the window, she could see the same federal building where her journey had begun. Somewhere in that building, new volunteers were beginning their transformation from ordinary humans into something unprecedented in the history of Earth. Sarah Martinez had started as an invisible researcher working in secret. She had become the mother of a new human species.